He rode into town wearing her dead husband's hat and said, "She sent me to finish what he started." The dust came first, rolling down the empty road like a ghost made of earth and wind. Sarah Whitlock saw it from her kitchen window while she pressed dough for the bread that nobody would eat. Her hands kept working even as her eyes tracked that brown cloud moving closer, growing larger, becoming the shape of a man on horseback. She knew the hat before she knew the man. It sat on his head the same way it had sat on Tom's, tilted just enough to keep the sun from his left eye. The leather band had darkened with sweat and years, and there, right through the brim, was the hole, clean and round as the day the bullet passed through. Sarah's hands stopped moving. Flour dusted her black dress like snow on a grave. The stranger dismounted slow, the way men do when they carry bad news or old secrets. His boots hit the ground heavy, stirring up little clouds that caught the afternoon light. He was younger than Tom would have been, but his face held the same kind of tired that comes from seeing too much sky and not enough home. He stopped at the bottom of her porch steps. Didn't come up. Didn't presume. Just stood there with Tom's hat throwing shadows across his face. "Mrs. Whitlock." His voice came rough, like words pulled through sand. She moved to the door, but didn't open it. Through the thin wood, she could feel the weight of what was coming. 3 years she'd worn black. 3 years she told anyone who asked that Tom died brave, died quick, died with honor. The widow's story, clean and simple as fresh laundry. "I know why you're here," she said through the door. "I don't think you do, ma'am." Her hand found the door handle. The metal was warm from the sun, smooth from all the time she'd turned it, waiting for someone who never came. She opened it just enough to see him whole, dusty coat, tired horse, her husband's hat with its story written in lead. "That hat belongs to the dead," she said. "No, ma'am. It belongs to the truth." The word hung between them like smoke from a blown-out candle. Truth. Such a small word for something so heavy. She'd built 3 years of life on top of Tom's grave, layer by careful layer. Got up every morning, made bread nobody ate, swept floors that didn't need sweeping, smiled at church when the other women patted her hand and called her brave. "Tom gave me this hat," the stranger said. "Night before he died." Tom died in the morning. Shot by raiders at Willow Creek. Tom died at night, and it wasn't raiders. The porch boards creaked under her weight as she stepped outside. The sun hit her face hard, making her squint. This close, she could see the stranger's eyes were gray as winter sky, and kind in the way of men who've learned kindness costs something. "You were there," she said, not asking. "I was. And you've come all this way to tell me my husband died different than I thought." He reached up, took off the hat. The bullet hole caught the light, made a little circle of brightness. "I've come to tell you he died saving someone who didn't deserve it. And that someone was me." The bread dough sat forgotten in the kitchen, slowly growing warm and useless. A hawk circled overhead, its shadow crossing the yard again and again. Sarah felt her carefully built walls starting to crack, like adobe in a drought. "Tell me," she said. So he did. Standing there in the hard light with the hat in his hands, he told her about the card game gone wrong. About Tom stepping in when he didn't have to. About the gun that came out too fast and the bullet that found the wrong man. He told her about holding Tom while the life ran out of him. About the last words that weren't about God or country, but about her. About Sarah and the baby she'd been carrying, the one that never got to meet its father. "He made me promise," the stranger said. "Made me swear I'd bring the hat home. Tell you he was thinking of you. Tell you he was sorry for leaving." Sarah's legs gave out slow. She sat on the porch steps, black dress spreading around her like spilled ink. The stranger didn't move to help. He understood that some weight you have to feel alone. 3 years, she whispered. 3 years I've been the brave widow. The one whose husband died a hero. He did die a hero, ma'am. Just not the kind they write about. She looked up at him then. This man who wore her husband's hat and carried her husband's last words. He wasn't handsome. Wasn't anything special. Just another drifter with sun-damaged skin and clothes that had seen too many miles. But he'd kept a promise to a dying man, rode who knows how far to deliver words and worn leather. "What's your name?" she asked. "Charlie Bennett, ma'am." The one who shot him, dead before Tom hit the ground. Tom made sure of that. She nodded, taking this in like medicine, bitter but necessary. The sun was starting to sink, painting the sky the color of old blood. Soon it would be dark, and she'd have to decide what to do with this new truth, this different ending to the story she'd been telling. "Keep the hat," she said finally. Charlie Bennett stood there, holding the hat like it might break. The shadow from the porch had grown long, reaching almost to where his horse stood patient and dusty. Sarah rose, brushed off her dress. There was bread dough waiting, even if nobody would eat it. There were floors to sweep, even if they were clean. But now, there was also this, Tom's real last moments, carried home by a stranger who'd learned too late what kind of man he'd been. "Thank you," she said, and meant it. As she turned back to the house, Charlie Bennett's voice stopped her. "He said one more thing, ma'am. Said to tell you the roses still need pruning." Her hand froze on the door handle. The roses, Tom's secret name for her, whispered in the dark when the world was just the two of them. Nobody else knew. Nobody else could know. Which meant Charlie Bennett had really been there, had really held her husband while he died, had really heard those last precious words meant only for her. She didn't turn around. Couldn't. But she nodded once, sharp and clear. Behind her, she heard Charlie Bennett mount his horse, heard the leather creak and the hooves start their rhythm on the hard-packed earth. The hat that had come home was leaving again, carrying new stories now, new shadows. The door closed soft behind her, and Sarah Whitlock stood in her kitchen, looking at the shapeless dough that would never become bread. Outside, the dust of Charlie Bennett's departure hung in the air like a question, and somewhere in the distance, a church bell marked the hour. The roses didn't need pruning. They'd needed it for 3 years. Tomorrow, maybe, when the sun came up and the world looked different, when the truth had time to settle like dust after a storm. Tomorrow, she might take the shears to those wild branches and cut away what had grown too long untended. But tonight, she had a new story to learn how to tell. Sarah hadn't slept. The new truth about Tom sat heavy in her chest, like a stone she'd swallowed whole. When the knock came at first light, she was already dressed, already waiting, though she couldn't have said what for. The man at her door was nothing like Charlie Bennett. This one stood straight-backed and clean-shaven, with hands that had never held a plow. His clothes were town clothes, dark and proper, but his eyes belonged to the wilderness, watchful and wild. "Mrs. Whitlock." He took off his hat. "Name's Jacob Turner. I believe you met my brother yesterday." The word brother hit her like cold water. She stepped back, let him see the rifle propped beside the door. Charlie Bennett said nothing about a brother. Charlie Bennett says nothing about a lot of things. Jacob Turner's smile was thin as paper. "May I come in? What I have to say shouldn't be said on porches." Against every instinct, she let him in. Maybe because she was tired of learning truths through closed doors. Maybe because the rifle was close and loaded. Or maybe because something in his careful way of moving reminded her of Tom. Men who carried violence like a tool, tucked away, but always ready. He sat at her kitchen table without being asked. She'd made new bread in the sleepless hours, kneading her confusion into dough. Now she cut him a slice, set it down hard enough to make her point. This was her house, her table, her rules. "Charlie told you Tom died saving him," Jacob said, not touching the bread. "He did. That's half the truth. The other half is why Tom was there at all." Sarah poured water from the pitcher, movement steady as her hands would allow. "Speak plain, Mr. Turner. I've had enough of men dancing around their words." He broke the bread then, careful and deliberate. Steam rose between his fingers. 10 years ago, your husband rode with my brother. They robbed a bank in Carson City. A guard died. A child was left without a father. The kitchen seemed to shrink. Sarah sat down slow, the chair creaking under the weight of this new knowledge. Tom had been wild before they met. She'd known that. But knowing and understanding were different animals. "You're lying," she said, but the words came out hollow. The child was 8 years old. A girl. She watched her father bleed out on the bank floor while Tom and Charlie and 2 others rode away with enough money to disappear. Jacob's voice stayed level, like he was reading from a ledger. Tom changed his name. Came here. Met you. Tried to build something clean on top of something dirty. Sarah's hands found each other across the table, holding tight. 3 years she'd grieved the hero. Now she was learning she'd married the villain. If this is true, she said slowly, why are you here? Why now? Because that little girl grew up. Because she found Charlie 6 months ago, put a gun to his head, and asked where she could find Thomas Whitlock. Jacob finally took a bite of bread, chewed like it hurt. Charlie could have given her this address. Instead, he got on a horse and rode here himself. To warn Tom, to die for him. The words hung in the air like dust motes in sunlight. Sarah remembered Charlie's story. The card game, the gun, Tom stepping in. But now she saw a different. Not a random act of courage. A planned sacrifice. Charlie knew she was coming, Sarah whispered. He started that fight on purpose. My brother was many things, Mrs. Whitlock, but he wasn't a coward. He couldn't live with what they'd done. When she found him, he saw a way to pay the debt. Jacob's eyes went distant. Tom tried to stop him. That's when the gun went off. Wrong angle, wrong moment. Your husband died, trying to keep my brother from dying for him. Sarah stood, moved to the window. Outside, her garden grew wild and untended. The roses Tom had planted climbed every which way, thorns catching the morning light. All this time, she thought he planted them for beauty. Now she wondered if he planted them for the thorns, some kind of penance, drawing blood every time he tended them. This girl, she said, she's still coming. Her name is Mary Carson. And yes, Sarah turned back to face this man who'd brought her husband's past into her kitchen. You're warning me. I'm giving you the same choice Charlie gave Tom. You can meet this head on, or you can run. He stood, left the bread half-eaten. There's money, hidden somewhere on this property. Tom's share from the robbery. Charlie told me that much before he left. Said Tom never spent a penny of it. Blood money. Money all the same. Enough to go somewhere new. Become someone new. Like Tom had. Like he tried to anyway. But the past had found him just the same, wearing Charlie Bennett's face and Charlie Bennett's guilt. Now it was coming again, in the shape of a girl who'd watched her father die. When? Sarah asked. Soon. Days, maybe. She was a week behind Charlie when he left. Jacob Turner put his hat back on, moved toward the door. In the morning light, she could see the family resemblance, something in the jaw, the way they held their shoulders. Brothers bound by blood and broken by choices. Why help me? She asked. Your brother's dead because of Tom. He stopped at the door, hand on the wood she'd spoken through yesterday, when everything was simpler. My brother's dead because of who we all were 10 years ago. You weren't part of that. Neither was the child you lost. The child. He knew about that too. Somehow. These men and their secrets, passing them back and forth like bullets in a gunfight. Find the money, Mrs. Whitlock. Use it to leave, or use it to stay and make things right. But find it. He opened the door, let in the morning air that smelled like dust and distance. Charlie thought Tom hid it somewhere only you would think to look. Somewhere that mattered. Then he was gone, another stranger leaving another trail of dust on her road. Sarah stood in her doorway, watching him shrink into the horizon. The bread sat cooling on the table. The rifle stood patient by the door. And somewhere on this land, blood money waited like a buried secret. She thought about Tom's hands, always cut up from those roses. Thought about how he'd planted them in a perfect circle like they were protecting something. Or marking it. The sun climbed higher, and Sarah Whitlock went to find a shovel. Mary Carson was coming, carrying 10 years of grief sharpened into vengeance. But first, there were roses to dig up and thorns to brave, and maybe, just maybe, a chance to pay a debt that had already cost 2 lives. The metal blade bit into earth that hadn't been turned in years, and somewhere beneath the roots and rocks, the past waited to be unearthed. The horses knew the way better than the riders. Jacob Turner led, but it was his mount that picked the path through stones and scrub brush, following some old memory of water and shade. Sarah followed on Tom's mare, the one he gentled with sugar cubes and soft words. The animal remembered kindness, even if the man who'd shown it was gone. They'd been riding since dawn, the leather bag of money split between their saddlebags. Sarah had found it right where her heart had told her to look, beneath the roses, wrapped in oilcloth like a shameful secret. $10,000 in bills gone soft with age, smelling of earth and old guilt. "You know how to shoot?" Jacob asked without turning around. Sarah touched the gun in her hip, Tom's gun, cleaned and loaded, but never fired by her hands. "I know how to hold it." Not the same thing. They stopped in the shade of a rock formation that looked like praying hands. Jacob dismounted smooth as water, tied his horse where a little grass grew stubborn between the stones. Sarah climbed down harder, her body already sore from hours in the saddle. Town living had made her soft, or maybe it was the grieving that had done it. 3 years of sitting still, waiting for something that would never come. Jacob took the gun from her holster, checked it like Tom used to, quick and sure, eyes elsewhere while his hands did the work. This is a good weapon, well maintained. Tom cleaned it every Sunday, like it was church. For men like us, it was. He handed it back, grip first. The metal was warm from her body, heavy with purpose. Sarah had held it before, moved it while cleaning, packed it away with Tom's other things. But this was different. This was holding it like it was meant to be held. "See that bottle?" Jacob pointed to a green glass flask someone had left on a flat rock, maybe 20 feet away. "Show me." Sarah raised the gun, aimed like she'd seen Tom do. Pulled the trigger. The sound cracked across the desert like thunder, echoing off the rocks. The bottle sat untouched, mocking her. "Again," Jacob said. She fired 5 more times. The bottle never moved. Her ears rang, and her wrist ached, and sweat ran down between her shoulder blades like guilt. When the gun clicked empty, she lowered it, ashamed of something she couldn't name. "Tom was a good teacher," Jacob said, taking the gun to reload. "Problem is, he taught you to be afraid of it. I'm not afraid. Your whole body flinches before you fire. You close your eyes. You hold your breath. You finish loading, spun the cylinder. You shoot like someone who's afraid of becoming what they hate." The truth of it hit her square. All those Sundays watching Tom clean his gun, she'd been thinking about the guard in Carson City, the child left behind. Now she was thinking about Mary Carson, somewhere out there, carrying her own gun and her own grief. "Show me different," Sarah said. So he did. For an hour in the desert shade, Jacob Turner taught her what Tom had hidden. How to breathe with the weapon, not against it. How to squeeze instead of pull. How to look at what you meant to kill. Really look and make peace with the looking. "Killing's not hard," he said while she practiced loading. "Living with it after, that's the hard part." Tom knew that. Charlie knew that, while they both try to find different ways. "Did you kill?" Sarah asked. "Back then, no. I was the one who held the horses. Kept watch. Told myself that made me different." He laughed, but it was dry as the dust at their feet. "Took me years to learn that watching evil and doing evil leave the same stain." Sarah raised the gun again. This time she kept her eyes open, breathed out slow, squeezed like she was holding something precious. The bottle exploded in a shower of green light. "Better," Jacob said. They rode on as the sun climbed toward its peak. The land grew rougher, redder, like the earth itself was bleeding. Tom had told her about this place, back when they were first married and still telling each other stories. How he prospected out here before he found better luck. She believed him then. Now she wondered if he'd been practicing his lies, seeing which ones she'd swallow. "Why are you helping me?" Sarah asked when they stopped to water the horses at a small spring. Jacob knelt by the water, cupped it to his face. "Maybe because I'm tired of blood paying for blood. Maybe because Charlie would have wanted it." He looked up at her, water dripping from his chin. "Or maybe because I see Mary Carson in my dreams, and she looks too much like you. Like me, someone who loved a man without knowing what he was. Someone who has to carry his sins now that he's gone." Sarah dismounted, joined him by the water. Her reflection wavered on the surface. A woman in men's riding clothes, gun on her hip, dust in her hair. She didn't recognize herself. But maybe that was the point. "Tom tried to tell me once," she said. "The first year we were married. He got drunk at Christmas, started talking about owing debts that couldn't be paid. I thought he meant money. In a way, he did. I told him the past was dead. that all that mattered was who he was now. She touched the water, watched her reflection break into pieces. I was wrong, wasn't I? The past never dies. It just waits. Jacob stood, water still dripping from his hands. We should keep moving. The canyon's another hour, maybe two. They rode in silence after that, following a trail marked by nothing but memory and regret. The sun beat down like judgment, and Sarah practiced drawing Tom's gun as she rode, getting used to the weight of it. Each time she touched the grip, she thought about Mary Carson, a girl who'd watched her father die, a woman who'd spent 10 years sharpening her grief into something that could cut. The canyon appeared like a wound in the earth, red walls rising on either side. At the entrance, Jacob stopped his horse. "This is where it happened," he said. "The planning, the dividing of roles, where four men decided that money mattered more than the life of a bank guard they'd never met." Sarah looked into the canyon's mouth. Somewhere in there, Tom had chosen the path that led to her door, led to their life together, led to Charlie Bennett's sacrifice and Mary Carson's journey toward justice or revenge. "She'll come here first," Sarah said, understanding flooding through her. "Before she comes to the house. She'll want to see where her father's death was born. Most likely. Then we wait here." Jacob turned to look at her, something like respect in his eyes. "You sure? We could still run. Take the money, disappear. Let her find an empty house and a cold trail." Sarah touched the gun at her hip. It felt natural now, like it belonged there. Like maybe it always had. "I'm done running from other people's ghosts," she said. They made camp at the canyon's entrance as the sun began its slow fall toward the horizon, painting the rocks the color of old blood. And somewhere out there, moving through the same dust and heat, Mary Carson rode toward them, a woman shaped by loss, carrying 10 years of waiting in her saddlebags. The desert held its breath, and Sarah cleaned Tom's gun the way he'd taught her, every Sunday whether it needed it or not. The desert stretched before them like God's own judgment, endless, patient, and without mercy. Sarah felt the horse shift beneath her, its breath coming hard in the thin air. Beside her, the stranger rode in silence, his face hidden beneath the shadow of his hat. They'd been riding for 3 days now, following a trail only he seemed to see. The sun hung low and red, painting the rocks the color of old blood. Sarah's throat burned with thirst, but she didn't reach for a canteen. Something about this place demanded suffering. It felt right to be thirsty here at the edge of all things. "There," the stranger said, his voice rough as sandpaper. She followed his pointing finger to a small adobe house, half buried in the hillside like it was trying to hide from heaven. Smoke rose from its chimney, thin and gray against the dying light. Someone was home. They dismounted without words. The stranger checked his gun, a gesture so practiced it seemed like breathing. Sarah touched the letter in her pocket, feeling the worn edges where she'd held it too many times. Her husband's last words, written in a hand already growing weak. "Find him. Not for what you think, but for what must be." The door opened before they knocked. The man who stood there wasn't what Sarah had expected. She'd built a monster in her mind, someone worthy of her hate. But this was just a man, old before his time, with shoulders bent like they carried invisible stones. His eyes were the color of rain on dust, and when they found hers, she saw he'd been waiting. "Sarah Morrison," he said, not a question, a statement heavy as lead. "You know why I'm here." "I do." He stepped aside, letting them enter. The house was sparse. A table, 2 chairs, a narrow bed. On the wall hung a single photograph, too faded to make out faces. "Been expecting you for 10 years. The stranger remained by the door, watchful. Sarah moved to the center of the room, feeling the weight of this moment pressing down like the heat before a storm. "You killed my husband," she said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. The old man nodded slowly. "I did. No excuses, no explanations. Just the truth bare as bone." Sarah had practiced this conversation 1,000 times in her mind. She'd imagined rage, accusations, maybe even violence. But standing here now, in this small room that smelled of coffee and loneliness, all her rehearsed words turned to ash. "Tell me," she said instead. The man sat heavily in one of the chairs, gesturing for her to take the other. The stranger remained standing, a guardian angel or executioner. Sarah wasn't sure which. Your husband, the man began, then stopped. His hands trembled as he poured water from a clay pitcher. Tom was his name. Tom Morrison. Hearing her husband's name in this man's mouth should have been an offense. Instead, it sounded like a prayer. We were young then, stupid with gold fever and whiskey courage. The man's voice grew distant, seeing things that weren't in the room. There was a claim dispute. Words became fists. Fists became guns. Sarah closed her eyes, seeing it all too clearly. Her Tom, quick to laugh but quicker to defend what was his. He drew first, the man continued. That's what I told myself for years. He drew first, so I had the right. His laugh was bitter as alkali water. But rights don't mean much when you're washing blood off your hands. Why did my husband send me to you? Sarah asked. His letter, he said to find you. Said it wasn't for revenge. The man's eyes filled with something that might have been tears, though in this dry place, it was hard to tell. Because he knew, the man whispered. Even as he lay dying, he knew what this would do to me. He looked at me with those eyes, same color as yours, and he said, I forgive you. Said it clear as day, though the blood was. He stopped, unable to continue. The room filled with the kind of silence that has weight, that presses against eardrums and makes hearts beat louder. Sarah felt something crack inside her chest. All these years, she'd fed her hate like a fire, keeping it burning through cold nights and empty days. But now, faced with this broken man who'd been carrying his own burden, she understood what Tom had known in his last moments. Hate was just another kind of chain. He sent me here to free you, she said, the words surprising her. And maybe to free myself. The man looked up, hope and disbelief warring in his weathered face. I've lived as a dead man for 10 years, he said. Stayed here at the edge of nothing, waiting for judgment. Sent money when I could. You probably never knew. But money can't buy back a life. No, Sarah agreed. It can't. The stranger spoke for the first time since entering. The desert keeps its debts, but also knows when they're paid. Sarah stood, her legs unsteady. She walked to the man and did what she'd never imagined she could do. She placed her hand on his shoulder, feeling the bone and sinew of a life worn thin by regret. My name is Samuel, he said, voice breaking. Samuel Carter. I wanted to tell someone my name for so long. Samuel, she repeated, and in speaking his name, something shifted. He wasn't the faceless killer anymore. He was a man who'd made a terrible mistake and paid for it every day since. They talked until the stars came out, filling the sky like scattered salt. Samuel told her about the mine, about the fight, about how Tom's forgiveness had haunted him more than any curse could have. Sarah told him about the years after, about learning to live with half a heart, about the strength she'd found in her grief. The stranger listened to it all, patient as the stones outside. When it was time to leave, Samuel walked them to their horses. The desert night was cold, but Sarah felt warm in a way she hadn't in years. Where will you go? She asked. Samuel looked out at the darkness, then back at her. I don't know. Maybe nowhere. Maybe everywhere. But I won't hide anymore. As they rode away, Sarah turned back once. Samuel stood in his doorway, no longer bent, watching them disappear into the night. She raised her hand, and he raised his, a goodbye, a blessing, a recognition of something completed. The stranger rode beside her, quiet until the house was lost to darkness. Your husband was a wise man, he said finally. He was, Sarah agreed. Wiser than I knew. They rode on through the desert, under stars that had seen every human story since the beginning of time. And somewhere in that vast silence, Sarah felt Tom's presence, not as a ghost or a memory, but as a peace that settled into her bones like coming home. The desert keeps many things, bones and secrets, prayers and promises. But that night, Sarah learned it also keeps room for grace. Tomorrow would bring new trails, new challenges. But tonight, under the endless sky, 3 souls had found what they didn't know they were looking for. Not an ending, but a beginning. And in the distance, Carried on the wind like a whisper came the sound of chains breaking, of debts paid, of hearts learning to beat again.